So, this is something you briefly mentioned earlier, and I just want you to tell me more about why you hate character creation, especially assigning stats.
Oh, girl.
Is it just the choice thing?
Part of it's choice. Part of it is that I hate math. And like, if you give me a limited pool of points, like let's say let's just take the Dark Souls character creator because that's probably the last one that I actually
Mm-hmm.
did. There's so many stats, and like I don't know which ones to put numbers into, and it's the same thing where I like being guided. I like you giving me a framework to work in. Like let's say for example, in Final Fantasy VII, the characters don't have classes per se. They have stats that kind of encourage a certain kind of playstyle, but then you give them all their material, you give them all their spells and attacks, you determine how the character plays. That I like because there's not a huge amount of choices, and each character kind of has kind of a framework. Like, Aerith is definitely supposed to be a healer. You can make her not a healer if you want to, but she's definitely kind of a magey character, and certain characters have things that they're good at already. If you had to assign stats in FF7 in addition to giving them material for their skills, I would hate that game because that's too many. You're asking me to do too much. I hate that my choices, which are almost always going to be based on either how I want my character to look or like things that aren't. I'm not like mechanically minded enough, I think, to really take into account how my stats are going to affect my character. And I hate pre-planning. Like I hate having to, like when I was playing Dark Souls and I was creating my character and everyone was saying like, "Oh, what build are you going to do?" I was like, "What do you mean what build? I just want to play the game."
Yeah.
And like suddenly I'm linked to this place and everyone's telling me like, "Oh, if you don't get like one of the good builds, you're not going to be able to do anything." And I was like, I don't like that. Like I don't want to read this wiki for 2 hours before I create my character.
Yeah, I like Dark Souls a lot, but in terms of the thing you are talking about is egregiously terrible. If you want to make an informed decision about how to do anything, including just making a character, you basically need prior knowledge.
Yeah, that drives me crazy. Even like talent trees, like WoW used to have,
Yes.
those like I hate that so much. I was playing Phantasy Star Online 2 like a couple months ago. And that's a game I really love. It's super super fun. But they have talent trees in that game and I kept trying to figure out like what to do, and then like the thing that I wanted to do everyone was saying was really bad, and I'm like, "Well, then why give me the option?" Like I hate that. I don't want to feel bad about myself for like choosing to play
Yeah.
the way I want. And I really like the way talent trees work in World of Warcraft now, where at each level you get 3 choices. And each one of them is going to be a little different. Sometimes they'll be way different and it like completely changes the way you play. I don't mind like different specs and stuff. Like I think that's cool. Giving you some choice is cool, especially in an MMO. In a single player RPG, I don't really care. Like I would kind of rather you build a character that you think is interesting and then have me play it. In an
Mhm.
MMO, I think it's a little different because you kind of have more ownership and because you're playing the character over such a long time and in different types of content. But I like the system they have where you have some choice, but it's not a ton. And I don't have to put that much thought into it. And in WoW, you can switch your talents at any time. So you can kind of switch up how you're playing on a dot. And it doesn't feel like, if I put a point into this stat, do I have to read up on the wiki? Am I going to screw myself 5 levels from now? That kind of thing drives me crazy.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think especially in a lot of older RPGs that was more of a problem.
Yeah.
Especially with all the ones I've played, they're based off of different editions of D&D. And so, I mean, if you don't know how D&D works when you start playing those games, you're probably going to have a lot less fun than either if you already knew or it was like a system that was built specifically for being used in a game.
Yeah. In D&D specifically, like live action D&D, I don't mind assigning stats there because I don't have to do it. A dice does it for me. Like that, and maybe that's not how D&D is played anymore. The last time I played was second
I,
edition,
I think a lot
but
of people still do the dice rolling thing, but in the games I play in, it's done with point buy, which is basically where you have a pool of points to spend on stats and you get to use them as you want.
yeah. Also in that game, there's not that many stats. Like,
There's 6.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not too bad. Like that I can deal with, and if it's not a huge pool, like I don't want to spend 100 points.
Hmm.
Like I'll spend a few points. Like when the values are low, I don't mind it as much. But in something like Dark Souls, there are so many variables, and everything affects something
Yeah,
else, and I just get
there's like 10 or 12
overwhelmed.
stats, and some of them are useless, and they don't tell you
Yeah,
what
some of
any
them
of
don't
them
even do
do.
anything. That
Yeah,
drives me
I think
crazy.
that's one of the flaws that you can do in an RPG where you have a lot of mechanically heavy things like that, is basically put in things that are traps for people that don't already know what they're doing.
Right.
And that's why I think, referencing some of these D&D based RPGs like Neverwinter Nights, and this isn't Neverwinter Nights' fault specifically because it was based off of 3.5 D&D,
Yeah.
and that was pretty notorious for having a ton of options for a bunch of different things, and almost all of them suck.
I did play that game. I like that game a lot.
I think one of the things they did well when they were making Neverwinter Nights is that when you had some of those things like feats where you had a million options in actual D&D and most of them were terrible, they
Mhm.
really trimmed it down to the ones that weren't going to be totally terrible.
Yeah, that was a fun game. Like D&D games usually I can deal with. Maybe it's because I'm more familiar with the settings and the systems, but like any
Yeah.
game where you want me to make my own class, I'm not into. Like I feel like I'm that kid who, like, some kids, the most exciting thing they can see is a box of assorted Legos because they can do anything they want. But I want you to give me like the Harry Potter Lego pack, or like technically I can make whatever I want, but I'm gonna make Hogwarts. I'm gonna make what I'm supposed to make, and then once I have made all that within that framework, I'll like make my own stories. But I don't want to have to build all the stuff first. Like I want, maybe this is kind of related. I don't like endings of like movies or books or whatever where I'm supposed to figure out what happened. Not that I'm supposed to figure out, but that I'm supposed to come up with my own ending.
uh
I hate that because I do that anyway. Like I'll think of my own ending anyway. Like I sat here for 2 hours because I want to know what your ending was. Like I want to know what your story was. And I'm kind of the same in games, I think, where I want someone to give me their complete vision. And I don't necessarily need to be as big a part of it as I think some people like to be. And that's why I don't really play games like Minecraft, because my mind just doesn't work like that. Like I don't want to be building stuff. Like I want to exist in a world that's been built already.
yeah, I don't play Minecraft for similar reasons, but I think that's a little bit different. There's, at least in the RPGs I've played, I think there's maybe a little bit more guidance than you remember there being.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with Western RPGs is probably a little older. And it's like, I don't know, it's just something about it kind of goes back to the linearity thing. Like, I like being guided. I like having specific things you want me to hit. Like, as long as those things are well crafted, I don't mind going back, I'll go back and replay games that are kind of linear. Like, I go back and read the same books all the time. I'll watch the same movies. Like, I don't mind repeating things. So maybe that's part of why I don't mind more linear gameplay and like not having options, because I don't, some people can't repeat things. Some people will never watch a movie after they've seen it once, but I can. If I like a movie, I'll watch it every day.
Um, yeah, I think I go back and replay some games that are basically linear, like Mass Effect 2 is probably, it's definitely one of my favorite RPGs, and I've played that a lot of times, and even though you have choice in what order you do your missions in for a significant part of the game, the missions are all linear basically.
Right.
I just think that, like you said, it's a very well defined vision and it's very finely tuned in that particular game that it is just very enjoyable. One of the more interesting, maybe a sort of overlooked intricacies of the Pillars of Eternity system basically made it so that a really good barbarian strategy was to put a lot of points into intelligence. And
Really?
so, yes, because each class has its own like base ability that they get at the first level, and it's usually passive. The barbarians is that they do melee attacks, and then if people are standing near the person they're attacking, they'll automatically make secondary attacks with like reduced accuracy and damage against everybody in that area.
Oh, cool.
And intelligence increases the radius of all area of effect abilities, which includes that area of effect carnage ability that barbarians have. And so if you jack up intelligence, you'll be able to hit everybody in a pretty ridiculously large area.
That's cool. That's the kind of intricacy that I would never explore that on my own, but I love that that exists.
Um, I think it was kind of a mistake, and I think they're maybe gonna try and maybe balance it a little bit better in the sequel, but I kind of hope that's still a thing because
That's that. I love the idea of like a smart, like a
yes,
scholar barbarian.
I built an entire character, which is one of my favorite characters I've played in RPGs in years, entirely around being a smart barbarian with a background as a scientist that fought crime. And so I would go around and be smart enough to like figure out when people were doing nasty or illegal things, and then I would like lift them off the ground and tell them that I would snap their neck if they didn't stop or leave or whatever.
So basically, you're Batman.
Yeah, I guess maybe just a little bit less subtle. And so playing the Punchman investigator was amusing, and that's the sort of thing I'm talking about when sometimes you can find something weird mechanically that leads to a really interesting character to play.
Yeah, that I really like, and I mean, and that's I think a testament to the insane amount of balance that class systems take. Like, I mean, a lot of JRPGs have class systems too, but I feel like they tend to be a little more regimented than like some Western games because there's less customization. But the more customization you put in, the more possibilities you have to consider, and the more like you have to test every possible build like that. I mean, even if I don't like all the customization, I respect the hell out of anyone.
I'm pretty much the secret is that they don't actually test all of it, which is how you get things like that. But another side of it is that they know that there's going to be certain things that are just inherently super busted and good, but they leave some of those in there because there are people out there who derive basically all their enjoyment from the game from figuring out how to do that.
Oh yeah. I was I forget in what context he was saying it, but I was listening to some podcast or a video or something with Jesse Cox, and he was talking about how everyone has a different idea of a power fantasy in video games. So for some people, Dark Souls, where you are totally outmatched and you have to fight the same dude 500 times to figure out his pattern to beat him, is their power fantasy. It's overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
He likes to play games like JRPGs where he can vastly outlevel everything and be a living god. And that's like it's different kinds of satisfaction. Like I'm kind of that same way where I don't want to be like super powerful. Like I want to be powerful enough to where I don't have to do a fight 3 or 4 times. Like I don't have the patience. Like if I've done something, if I can prove that I can like kill an enemy, I don't want to die right after and then have to kill him again. But I don't like, so I like overcoming a little bit of adversity, but I also like being kind of in control and powerful. I hate min-maxing. I can't min-max. My brain just doesn't work on that micro level. My brain works on a macro level. I have infinite patience to understand the intricacies of Kingdom Hearts and Neon Genesis Evangelion, but don't ask me to look at even the most basic set of numbers and like try to figure out how that's going to make my character better, because I'm not here for that.
Yeah,
like, I can't do it.
I don't like min-maxing either because it just kind of tests my patience, and also I find that kind of in the opposite effect of the scientist barbarian, whenever you min-max a character, it usually leads to a character that would be either boring or weird or absurd to play. It's like an actual role-playing thing. And so I like to toy around with things and optimize, but I don't like to min-max.
Right. I think there's definitely a fine line between like making your character, having something you want to do with them and pursuing that, and you know, being down to the number and going crazy.
Yeah,
I can't.
I mean, I was not the person by any means that discovered the intelligence barbarian thing in Pillars of Eternity, but when I read about it, when I went and played in my game, I specifically did things that were technically worse because I just thought it would be more personally enjoyable to play it that way.
Right. It's another priority thing. Like I'm definitely, you're saying that you were kind of role playing a certain way. Like I'm definitely someone who prioritizes role playing. Like right now I'm playing the sequel to Bravely Default, and I did the same thing in the first game where each character I had incomplete, sometimes deference to their stats, and there's not a huge difference in the stats, but there's definitely like certain roles that they are probably better at. But to me, I would pick a character. I'd say this character is a mage character, or this character likes wearing cute clothes, or and then like that determines how I give them their classes for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason have gotten into the isometric RPG isn't because I like isometric games or even like I mean to a certain degree I kind of like the pause and play strategic combat, but that's not really the main thing for me. It's because of the way you get to build your character and just
Right.
play a character and see things unfold based on what you do and have a really highly reactive world. That's why I play RPGs, I guess. Like I think something in some of these games that goes along with that is I think the times I've been the most like internally terrified playing these games has not been in like some tense combat situation. It's been when I'm like in a dialogue,
Oh yeah.
because at least the ones that I play the most, the writers are pretty committed to having things play out in a believable way, and that means like you're never safe in a dialogue if anything's at stake more or less.
Right.
And so I mean I was replaying the start of Tyranny in preparation for this, and like at one point the most scared I got during the time I played was when basically my character's boss, who could kill me on a whim if he really felt like it, asked me to come back to his court and talk to him, and instead of going there immediately, I went to meet with some guy because I had to do it right then.
Right.
And like we were talking about like pretty treasonous shit, and so and you can't lie to this guy that's your boss because he'll know. And so like the most scared I was just like clicking on the map to go back there and just being like, I wouldn't be surprised if I just died if going here. And
Awesome.
that is partly due to the nature of that game in particular, where instead of having a game where you play it for like 40 to 100 hours with a really expansive world and stuff, they made a smaller scope in some ways, but I mean, the first act is kind of a setup for the rest of the game, and it's pretty narrow, and the end of the game is relatively narrow, and it's kind of like the culmination of the things you did.
Right.
And then the second act is this huge sprawling flowchart you can find on the wiki if you go look it up, based on things you do there and in the first act, and it's just this huge flowchart of all the different paths that you can take. And playing the game the second time, down to like the main goal of what I'm doing in the game, is completely different from the first time I played the game.
That's awesome. You showed me the flowchart the other day, and I said that it was simultaneously like I was so impressed by it and also so stressed out just thinking about having to plan all that out. Like
But
that's
like
crazy.
that's the thing, you don't plan it out. That's why
I mean, like on
that's
the part of the developers,
oh yeah,
like for
no,
them to plan all that out and like
I'm
make
sure
all
that
these
was
sections of the game that you know players aren't going to see. Like that
yeah.
is really cool.
I mean, I think statistically most people never finish games even once, but like if you only play this game one time, you're basically seeing like a quarter of the content, sort of.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of games don't have meaningful choices in them. Because
Yeah.
like we have like time and money is already so short in game development now. Like, do we really want to make a whole section of this game that not everyone's gonna see?
And that does suck, I think, but when you do make that game and people play it, I think it's extremely rewarding.
Oh yeah.
Because, I mean, one of the testaments to, I think, how well that particular structure was done is that it's basically entirely transparent when you're actually playing the game, because you play the game and you just do stuff, and then stuff happens that kind of logically follows, and you wouldn't necessarily, like, there are parts where it's like, yeah, if I had made this major choice, it would have proceeded in a different way in this big way.
Like it makes sense.
Like there's basically four major paths through the second act of the game, and two of them are really obvious because they present these like two big factions that you have to choose between at one point. But then the other two are more or less hidden, and you like it's something that if you just kind of make certain decisions will present themselves to you. That's like the most interesting thing, and I'm on one of those now, and it's a wild ride.
Yeah. That's a testament to writing. Like, for a situation to make you more tense than a fight, I think is really good writing. I think for the path you're taking to feel real and not feel like a flowchart is a testament to really good writing.
Especially when you consider this type of game, and it's not like, you know, a Final Fantasy 15 where there are these like gorgeously animated and voice acted cinematics. It's still like the isometric perspective, and there's like lines of dialogue or whatever, but a lot of the time you're just reading text.
I really want to play at some point Divinity 2, because even though that game is like has so many things that I normally wouldn't like, the fact that you can play it with other people, I think would, you know, because I'll play almost anything with other people. Like I enjoy playing like social games.
Yeah.
But I've watched streams of people playing that, and it goes down like a D&D game where like everyone's in town.
One of the things I wanted to say as soon as you brought that up is like, out of all of the games we've talked about, including the ones that were literally based off of D&D, Divinity Original Sin is by far the one that feels the most like an actual game of D&D.
Yeah.
Just down to like the stupid things that people do that make no sense whatsoever when you actually think about it for more than a few seconds. Like, I didn't play that far in the game, but I played it with another friend, and the very first town you go into, since you can be as far apart as you want, basically, I was standing around some building talking to some people, and then suddenly, like, my friend just says, oh, well, now I'm getting beat to death by the quartermaster, because I guess he tried to steal something or whatever, and so then I just walk across town to where he was and found out that he's just dead. He died because he tried to steal something in front of a quartermaster who was, like, 4 levels higher than us.
Yeah, I was watching 4 people stream it, the second one, because you can have 4 players in the second one, which is incredible. And they were all in a town, and one of them wandered off and found a cat. And his character can talk to animals, so he's like talking to the cat. And then someone came and like killed the cat, or like an NPC like insulted the cat, so he like randomly attacked there. And so everyone else is in town like shopping, and all of a sudden the entire town turns aggro on the party. And everyone's like, what's happening? Like, what's happening? And he's like, I don't know what happened. I was just talking to an NPC. They're like totally hiding it until like... And then it happened again later when someone, like your friend, they tried to steal something and they like clicked the wrong button or something, and the entire town just went crazy on them. And like, you can kill quest givers in that game. Like, you can do all sorts of stuff to like...
Yeah, I mean... At the time I played that game, we accidentally found the main plot earlier than you're supposed to, just because we did stupid things. Like, you're kind of supposed to follow this investigation and then find out what's going on. But instead, we were like in the doctor's place or the infirmary or whatever, and the attendant there is some woman, and she's like, yeah, I've got this weird rock and it helps heal people. And then you just like touch it, and then suddenly you get teleported to like the literal end of time. And we're just like, we're flabbergasted, and neither of us say anything for a little bit, and we're just like, is this the main quest?
Well, that I guess in the new Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, you can go fight Ganon as soon as you start the game, if you want to.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have said, and I'm sure speedrunners everywhere are rejoicing. Yeah.
You know, you don't have to find glitches to finish the game in 10 minutes anymore. But, you know, like, that kind of thing is right. I don't know if the second one's still in early access or not, but that's when I think we need to, like, get a group together one day and just...
Yeah, I believe it's still in early access, but I think it's coming along pretty well. I mean, if you ever get the first one, we can jam that.
Yeah. I know people are working on, like, 4-player mods for that, too, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of janky, I think, because you can have like 4 players in the party, but 2 of them are NPCs.
Right.
So I don't think you can have 4-player made characters in the party.
Well, I think in the second one you can still, with a 4-player party, you can still recruit NPCs into your party.
Oh no.
And you just get multiple characters. Like, someone has to say, but like at the same time, because it happened in the one I was watching, someone wanted to join the party, but they're like, someone has to take responsibility for this dude now.
Yeah.
And no one wanted to. So they just abandoned him. because you have to manage like 2 inventories, you have to manage like 2 people to level up. So they're just like, nah, forget it.
Inventory management strikes me as another thing you don't like dealing with.
Yes. I don't like keeping track of things. Like, also, I'm the type that I don't use items if I always feel like if I use an item now, I'm gonna not have it when I need it later. Knowing full well, based on experience, that I'm not going to use the item later either.
Yeah, I'm mad
unless
about
it's a healing
that
item.
too, actually. I don't like it when like the game is managing your inventory.
Yeah.
But I like getting stuff, and when you're getting stuff, that means you have to figure out where to put it.
Yeah.
So kind of by extension, I'm okay with it. I know that another problem in Pillars of Eternity they had was for loot they did like what you see is what you get. So like if you fight 5 dudes that are wearing like a breastplate and wielding spears, then when you kill them, you're going to get 5 breastplates and 5 spears.
Right. Which I like in theory. Because
yeah, they're like, that seemed like a great idea at the time, but then you just have people picking up all this random junk that's not actually really worth their time.
Yeah.
And you could put it in your stash, but then they had a bug in the game, I don't know if it ever got patched out, where like if there was too much stuff in your stash, which given the way loot works is a very real possibility, the frame rate in the game would just start tanking even if the stash wasn't open.
Oh no.
Just because of the amount of junk you had.
Right. See, like that kind of thing where I either want to sell everything or everything has to have a specific purpose. Like I get rid of stuff. Like I can't keep it around and have like big lists of things. Like then that's when I start to get like it starts to be too much. But I hate like when you're in World of Warcraft and you're like, you know, you need to get like 5 boar tusks and you kill a boar and you can't take its tusk. Like,
yeah,
I get it. I get that that's part of the gameplay loop and you can't have everyone finishing every quest right away, but like it's so dumb. Like why wouldn't you be able to take the horn?
I have phenomenally terrible luck with things like that, and so I tried playing World of Warcraft back when it was still in its sort of early days, but I could basically just never finish quests because I would never get the things that you needed to drop.
Yeah, I mean, generally me and RNGesus aren't good friends. For some reason in Final Fantasy XIV, my luck seems to be pretty good, and I shouldn't have said that because it's gonna be bad from now on. But as long as it's not a dice roll, if I'm rolling for gear, I'm not gonna get it most of the time.
Yeah.
I for some reason me and dice do not get along. I always roll really low, but like where things I need something to like proc or like you know, certain mechanics where you need to do a certain type of content and hope you get like a random drop from it, like that I'm usually good with in that game. But in most games or even in like just like D&D and stuff, I'm not good with random chance. Even though I love it. I love random chance.
Going back to the topic I brought up of like branching paths in RPGs, is that something that happens in JRPGs much? I know that there's a lot of Japanese games that will have like several endings, but I don't know how different the things leading up to those are.
Not very. It's very uncommon.
I might be showing how terribly inept I am, but isn't Chrono Trigger like that?
Oh yeah. See, and this is, if I didn't piss off people when I said Skyrim was dumb, I'm gonna piss them off now. I think Chrono Trigger, like objectively as a piece of art, is an incredible achievement. I don't personally love it, so I don't have like the intense feelings of love most people have for it. That game is insanely complex. There's like a million different endings. That game actually you can finish in a variety of ways. That's another game where you can fight the end boss really early if you want to, or you can go do a bunch more stuff and like it changes your party. My possibly favorite game of all time, Star Ocean 2, and Star Ocean 1 did this too, and the games after did not. There were 8 slots in your party that you could fill, and there were, I don't want to count them all, but there's a lot more characters than that. And the characters you got, like there were some characters that would naturally join you in the story, but you could still reject them if you wanted to, because there were a lot of optional characters later that if your party was filled, you couldn't get them. And so you can't get everybody on one playthrough. Even sometimes on 2 playthroughs, you can't get everybody. Like there's 2 main characters in that game. Each character sees some specific events that the other doesn't, but there's no general difference between the actual story. And each one of them has like a specific character that you can only get playing their run. And then you have other characters that will preclude other characters you need to get other characters. And so that changes the game a little bit. Mechanically, it changes the game completely. But as a result, the other characters aren't as involved in the main story. Like, let's say you're having an event and something important happens. There's maybe 5 different lines of dialogue you might get depending on who's in your party, but their interaction with that scene doesn't really change.
Yeah.
And I assume that's why after that in Star Ocean 3 and onward, they didn't have secret characters anymore. Like they might have had 1 or 2 secret characters, but they didn't have 3 did a little bit, but the other like 4 and 5 didn't have characters that would you could only get on one playthrough, or that you would like couldn't get a character if you got another one. I think because they wanted the characters to be more involved in the central plot. And on the one hand, I really like that because I think it just makes for like a really cohesive narrative. On the other hand, I really did miss like being able to choose my party and like having it be completely different every time. And in Star Ocean, again in the earlier games, there were a ton of different endings, but the endings are all like characters ending up together. So if a character fights a lot with another character in battle, or they use healing on each other a lot or something, they have an invisible affection value. And when that gets high enough, they get an ending. So every 2 characters could have an ending in that game. So there was like that kind of ending where like it didn't affect the game really. It was just at the end you get all these little vignettes of whatever characters ended up together. Although in Star Ocean 2 specifically, they made a sequel for Game Boy Color, which then gave you canon endings for everything, which I think is always funny when you have a game with multiple endings and then you make one canon. I feel like it's kind of a mean thing to do to people, but
I know that in terms of like the supporting cast, I know at least in some of the games I play, like for example, in an interview, like a retrospective interview, they talked about going from Baldur's Gate 1 to 2. In Baldur's Gate 1, they had a ton of different people you could put in your party, and that's yeah, I mean that's fun for I guess the reason you get to customize your party a lot. But then as they kind of realized people liked having more interactive party members, they toned down the number and made them more involved.
Yeah. I think it's a tough thing to do. And maybe like especially in Star Ocean in particular, like I hated the cast in Star Ocean 3. Like almost every member of that party I hated. So like I would have loved to be able to swap in some other people and I just couldn't. But then in like Star Ocean 4, which is like the black sheep of the series that everyone hates except for me, because I think it's wonderful. Like all the characters had a place in that team, and like they all had more of a cohesive kind of feel to them. So it's definitely like, you know, as games want to be more cinematic and stuff, I think it is tougher to make optional party members, or like, you know, in a game where party member, like we were saying before, if a party member can leave, you can't make something essential for them later on.
Yeah. It's a fine line, I think.
I mean, you know, it's just a stylistic thing. It's what kind of game you want to make. Some games, the cool thing is that anything can happen. In some games, the cool thing is that these specific things happen.
To touch on this and maybe wrap things up a little bit. We haven't really said a lot about supporting casts. So talk a little bit about supporting casts in JRPGs.
I think they tend to be, I don't want to say quirkier. I think they tend, and this again I think is kind of a Japanese storytelling thing. They'll have one trait that is their thing. And that is like every cutscene, like in Bravely Default is a good example, where the characters are complex, but like they have maybe 2 or 3 traits that in every single dialogue scene, that's their contribution to it. And for some people, that's really repetitive. For some people, it's always funny. And I know like a lot of Japanese like gag manga is you have a group of characters, each one of them has 2 or 3 specific quirks, and the plot of every single story is all of that converging on one situation. Like maybe you have like a really normal main character and he wants to go to the park or something, but then all these characters are there and like they each have their quirk and they all make everything chaotic. And like that'll be every story. And for some people that's incredibly like boring and dull, but like for some people it's just like the style of comedy is that like, oh like look, the guy's being like pervy again, or like, oh look, you know, she's making poison food and trying to make everyone eat it again. Like it's those like little quirks that I think get emphasized a lot.
Wait a second, poison food? Is that like a real thing that happened, or is that just an example?
No, that was too specific a reference. So the because the manga I was thinking of, Kateku Hitman Reborn, which eventually turned into a bottle manga because GOG manga they're not like super popular and they're hard to continue for a long time. It's hard to come up with jokes. But that one of the characters is like most like half the characters in that are in the mafia. Like in this like fictionalized like very Japanese version of the Italian mafia. And one of the characters, her specialty is making poison food. She only cooks regularly, but all her food ends up being poison. Somehow it's like her special power. And like they always have like insects in them, but she thinks she's just making food to like give to people to show her love. But it becomes her weapon. But like that's her every issue or every story. She would come in and she would have like poison food because she was in love with one of the characters and she's trying to get him to eat it. And like she'll try to give him a pie and like he'll get out of the way so it goes to someone else. There was a like one character that looks like her dead boyfriend, so she would always like freak out, and like those were her things. And every story with her involved those, and like you would get other aspects of her personality, but I don't think I don't know. I think that just style of characterization where you have one or two points that you hammer home again and again in different situations to kind of give you a different idea of them. Like I don't think that exists as much in Western RPGs, and I think the characters just tend to be weirder.
Yeah, I think I take that. I think I take that as true. It's not like they have in Western RPGs. I feel like at least the ones that have specifically strong supporting casts, because if you get something like Skyrim, there's not really. I mean, there are characters, but I wouldn't say any of them are like the supporting cast exactly.
Yeah.
But in the ones that have strong ones, it's not really about quirks or weird personality traits. It's more about, I guess in a lot of them, it's about some sort of strongly held belief or goal.
Right.
At least in the games I like, that's often in some way being strongly tied, at least thematically, into whatever the main plot is. And that's something I think another thing Pillars of Eternity does well, because I mean, kind of a big part of the central theme of the game or themes is basically having faith in a sense of identity, and all the party members you can add to your party in that game have some sort of quest that ties into those ideas, just in very different ways. Like I'll give two examples of two of my favorite ones. One of them is a farmer who used to worship the god of sunlight and rebirth, I think. I'm not 100% on all the gods. Which, see, it sounds weird because I like the game so much, but some of the things you just don't need to know.
Pantheons are complicated. It's fine.
But then there was somebody who showed up in the neighboring country who like did glow and shit, who claimed to be like the mortal incarnation of this god and started waging a war on his country. And he basically just didn't believe that it was true and fought against the other countries they were invading. But I mean, they ended up winning the war. They blew the god up with a giant bomb made by followers of another god.
Pretty good.
And basically, his personal story in that game has to do with both coming to terms with his faith, especially since after the war, obviously, people who worshipped that god were very unpopular in his country.
Right.
But then also trying to figure out what happened to his brother and coming to terms with the fact that when his brother went and joined the war, he ended up switching sides. And the thing about the game, and I guess this is something that can but doesn't always happen with the companion quests, is that a lot of the times the endings to them kind of feel really unfulfilling, and I think that was intentional in a way.
Yeah.
Because, well, we already said spoilers for this game earlier, so spoilers again, if that wasn't enough. When you basically, his quest goes, you talk to him about this, you go to an archive in the city to try and look up records from the war, and you found out that where he was serving, there was a battle somewhere in the country that you end up visiting later, and so you go there searching for any sort of hints as to what had happened to his brother.
Oh, cool.
You end up finding this banner that was kind of torn and half buried, and using your sort of soul-seeing powers, you get this kind of very vague vision of him going and meeting this mortal god that was leading the other army and
Wow.
deciding to join him, and then that's it. That's the end of the quest.
Have fun with that knowledge.
You tell him, like, I think you can lie, but I don't. You basically tell him your brother joined the other side, but I don't know why and I don't know what happened to him. And he almost regrets having gone and found out all of this in the first place.
Right.
But I mean, then as events unfold more throughout the game, you talk to him a bit more, and that basically shapes what he does, like, after the game ends. The other party member I wanted to talk about is a paladin, and paladins are kind of different in this setting than in D&D, in that it's basically somebody who has a very strong conviction towards a set of beliefs and values held by specific groups, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So her paladin order is the Brotherhood of the Five Sons, which is a reference to the five dukes that rule this country that she's from. And so they basically serve the interests of the dukes. And so her story is that she's being sent to negotiate a trade agreement with one of the neighboring nations, and they want her to negotiate a trade agreement that would hurt the nation that most of the game takes place in, but help both the nation she's negotiating with and hers. But she personally believes that that's a short-sighted and will just cause problems, and she would rather negotiate another agreement that involves not having exclusive trade with this other nation so that everybody can kind of get something. And so it's kind of the conflict between her doing her job in terms of, like, she's supposed to take orders from her superiors in this brotherhood, because that's I guess the way most people see is serving the dukes, but she thinks that she wants to do things her way because she feels like that's what the best thing for her nation is, and that's something she cares about deeply. And so I guess this usage of the supporting cast, which is probably my favorite in Western RPGs, is basically that they kind of augment what's in the main story.
Yeah, I think the best cast does. Like, I know the for me, a cast like that is the cast of Final Fantasy VII, where every character in that game is dealing with very specific issues of identity, either like who they think they should be or who they think they are, and finding out that they're not. And that game feels so much more cohesive because all those characters are dealing with the same kind of issue, even if it's not like, one character wants to go to space, another character, wants to free his people from control of like a corporation. Like, they're very different conflicts, but they're all kind of dealing with the same core set of problems. And I think it makes everything just feel a lot more tight.
Yeah, if I was going to say in Pillars, the thing that every character ends up facing is basically some event or revelation that makes them question the things they believe in, like, fundamentally, and then their sense of identity based on those.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, and it's why I think the story in that game is one of my favorites, but it also leads to some, not even like dark in the gritty sense, but just like kind of empty, depressing things that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, partly depending on how things go, or just sometimes kind of by the nature of it, like, the answer is fundamentally leaving something to be desired or disappointing.
Right, so that's why you're saying, like you were saying before, it's done on purpose. It's not like...
Yeah, I think that was absolutely intentional. Like, normally, when you design something in a game, you don't want it to be leaving the player feeling, like, deeply unsatisfied.
Right. But if you want the character to be feeling that...
Yeah, but, like, that's... I mean, by the time you get emotionally invested into the game, it kind of happens to you too, I guess.
Right.
And so I think... I mean, not that they made some... There are, like, some big mistakes, and they are ready to admit to them in terms of how they made that game, but I don't think you do something that obvious and consistently and have it not be on purpose.
No, I think if it's thematically appropriate, like, it's not the kind of game where things get tied up with a neat bow and everything's fine.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely like, but that's again good writing. That's understanding what your story is and what your world is like, and the kind of the best way to portray that and make the characters feel real, because that's a real thing. Like most of life is anticlimactic. It's not, and like some games like to have the climax, like everything gets tied up in a bow and it feels good, but not everything needs to be like that.
Yeah, I think to an extent it's a little bit more vague, but like your player character, the protagonist, is confronted with a similar question as to, I guess on some level, it's a question of whether you're responsible for things that happened in your past life or not. Because, I mean, you can get to the end of the game and basically be like, I don't really care what you're doing, but there are other reasons that I have to be here. I don't know if it's necessarily like a super bold move, but I don't think it's a move that a lot of games would necessarily take. It's like you have this main antagonist and you can get to the final confrontation and be like, I didn't care that you were doing all these terrible things. I'm just here out of self-interest.
See, that does not happen in a JRPG. Like, you better be concerned about that villain. They spent a lot of time making him do cool stuff. Like, he is your entire world at the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're always gonna have to be concerned about the person, but you don't necessarily have to care about the evil things that they were doing, I guess.
Right, it's not your main priority. There's other stuff going on.
Like, one of the things you can choose to do at the ending is, like, beat him up and then turn around and do yourself what he was going to do anyway. And that's, like, a valid choice that you can make.
That was similar to, I really liked the ending choices in Fallout New Vegas. I liked Fallout 3 more, but I think Fallout New Vegas had much more engaging ways of ending the game that let you make your own choice based on how you'd played up to that point.
Well, here's my plug, but that's the same studio that made Pillars of Eternity.
Oh, snap. And that was, it's RPG-ish. Deus Ex Human Evolution made me so mad with the ending because I thought the game was brilliant, and I thought the endings were just like so kind of binary, and like none of them really reflected the way that I felt like my Jensen saw the world.
Yeah, there's that, but then also you get to choose the ending, but it's completely determined by pressing a button rather than the sum of things that you did up to that point in the game.
It doesn't feel earned, and it doesn't feel like...
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It doesn't feel like you earned it.
It doesn't feel like you earned it, and it doesn't feel like the story earned any of the conclusions.
Yeah. It really struck me as odd because they're all very sort of almost hardline views in those endings. Like, this is something that needs to happen. So
extremist.
But like, Jensen as a character is someone that specifically spends the entire game kind of not aligned with any of those things in particular.
Right. Every choice is like, here's a hardline choice that will have this consequence, and that's on you. I'm like, I don't want any of this. Like, none of that. That's a whole nother... I mean, we could spend a whole podcast talking about endings and like how many different ways you can do them.
Maybe we will.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great... I think endings are fascinating. I mean, it's just so funny how that can... You know, I think that's the hardest part of building a game like that, is giving people a range of endings that are satisfying and that feel like they actually reflect the game that you played. And I think that's what happened above all, and we can definitely talk about it more another time, with Mass Effect. I think those three choices they give you at the end of the game felt like they didn't reflect the game that people had been playing up until then, and that's what made them so mad. Whether or not the actual endings themselves were, you know, good or bad.
Yeah.
I think it was that choice of those. I think it's either 2 or 3. Maybe they added the third one later. Yeah, and people just didn't feel like it reflected that game. So it's a tough thing to pull off.
Well, I think like all good things, this podcast has to come to an end.
Yeah, we've been going for a little over 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I think we did it. I think we covered a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, again, there's so many things that these kinds of games have in common, but there's just something that feels different between them. And, you know, it's hard to tell if it's like us imposing that on them or if it's like the actual countries themselves. But I like that there's different types of games. I can never understand the perspective of people who are like, oh, well, Western RPGs suck, they should stop making. Like, no. Like, that's dumb. They shouldn't make things that, or they shouldn't stop making things because I don't enjoy them. And I feel like it's easy to fall into the mindset of I play JRPGs, so it's easy to write off like the other side. But I think that it's good to play other types of games, and I'm sure that if I play like Pillars of Tyranny especially, I really want to play because I really like
Well, I'm
the
sorry I
approach to the
spoiled
story.
everything, but I think you'll still enjoy it nonetheless.
No, it's fine. It's one of those. It's one of those things where like games that complicated, like even if you get spoiled on parts, like actually playing it, you're gonna get so much more that like is gonna be in context, so it's fine. But yeah, I think it was a good discussion. I think that I have some games I want to play. I got to complain about stats, so that's always fun for me.
Yeah, I don't think I did a lot of complaining, but that's because I try to at least have a pretty open mind. I guess I
Yeah.
complained about games not using their antagonists properly.
I think that's a valid.
That's my
complaint,
pet peeve.
though. Yeah. So it was good. We should definitely do this again. We can come up with some other stuff to talk about. All right, so that does it for our first podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It was super long, so if you made it all the way here, you are a true American hero. You're a true hero of whatever country you may be from. It doesn't need to be an American hero. If you liked this video and you want to see more things like this, please leave a like. You can subscribe to see more videos, and I will see you soon.